Hey everyone, Sakurayasin here, and in this episode of Creating Kei, I'm gonna try to render this image of Aradicus, just make him look kind of more 3D. Um, and I'll use a different technique than I used in the last episode where I did the image of Kei, but otherwise I'm gonna try to keep it similar in that I am still going to work with, I'm still going to work in real time and just talk you through what I'm doing. So there will be no fast forwarding or anything like that. So let's just look at this and see, is there anything that's very off? And I kind of see that this, this horn goes doot doot, and then this, and this one goes doot. That's kind of weird. So I'm thinking I might want to change that and bring it so it's more like the other one, so it goes down. In which case this would need to be more straight. So there's that. But otherwise I think should be okay. So last time it was really about a grayscale to color technique, and I do like working with that, but I actually work with tons of different techniques, so I don't just have one fixed way of doing things. So I'll just show you a different technique where this time we're not going to go from grayscale to color, but what we're going to do is more just focus on light. I mean, in the other version, we're still focusing on light as well. So I don't know. Let me just make a value checker layer at the top. So what I'm doing is you just have to fill it with any desaturated value, like anywhere from white to black. It can be gray. I mean, it has to be like no saturation. And then set that layer to color mode, and then you can check the values, and that helps you to see, if things look good. All right, and I'll change the background so it's darker, and I'll give it a bit of a color. So often when I do backgrounds, I look for a color that already exists in the character. So in this case, I'm thinking if I want the yellow to stick out, kind of going towards this blue might be good. And I tend to go kind of desaturated. So something like that seems fine to me. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to desaturate this a bit, like the image of the guy. Not that much, but I want to desaturate it just a little bit so I have a bit more color to work with when I bring in the lights. So let's see. I'll lighten it a bit and desaturate it a bit. Okay, so one of the things with cel shaded stuff is it looks fine if everything's super saturated, but as you add more values to things, they start to look worse if they are too saturated. So that's why I kind of desaturated it a bit. So I have the original on a layer and a background, and then this like lighter and desaturated version. Okay, now I'm gonna duplicate that, and I'm going to hit Control U. That brings up the hue saturation slider again. And this time I'm gonna increase the saturation. I'm going to decrease the lightness. And I'm gonna change the color a little bit more warm. So I moved it towards the red. Like you can, that's too crazy, but you can move it towards red like that, or more towards green like that. And I'm moving it a little bit towards the red. So what I'm going for is kind of like if you turn the lights out, what would this look like. So it's kind of the lights off version. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an adjustment layer, which is down here. Hit the half white, half black circle. I'm going to hit hue saturation. Actually, I could do this a different way. I'm going to use a photo filter here. And I'm going to cool it down. So right now it's a warming filter. I'm going to use a cooling filter. And I kind of like this one. Okay, so now I'm going to take this layer and clip it to this layer underneath. So we have this. And I can kind of see how much I want. This is pretty much okay. So now I'm going to merge that down. So now I have this shadow version and this light version. And now what I'm going to do is basically just be, I'm going to turn a mask on. So now I've got this masked. And I'm just going to be painting with black on the mask layer, which will reveal, it will kind of erase the shadow so we get the light showing through. So it's a bit hard to explain, but it's easy to show. But before I do that, I actually want to go ahead and put in my my ambient light and maybe some deep shadow. So I made a layer above this guy, and I'm going to clip down to, or I'm not going to clip down. I'm going to just select this and I'll make a mask. So now whatever I paint on this layer is just going to stay within here, right? And I'm going to use a blue, and I've set this to soft light, and I've got a blue color, and I'm just going to paint the top facing planes. So this is facing the top. So it's still going to kind of look like the lights are off, but that there's a bit of light from the top now. And this is just going to be as if there was sky like above him. So any plane that's sort of facing the top is going to get some of this blue on it. So the nose, the top of the nose is going to get some of this blue. And again, the layer mode is at soft light. So you get this very kind of like soft feeling of light. I mean, the name is pretty good, soft light. You get a soft light. So these fingers, those are all facing up. This part's facing up. This is facing up. So these are all the planes that are facing up, but they're not necessarily the direct light source. So the light source already kind of is coming from the top down. So I guess that's already established. But the important thing is that if you weren't, if you weren't doing an image with a fixed light source where the light's coming from directly above for the direct light, and you were doing it for just like there were no shadows put in, then you could do you could still use this if this was representing the sky, and you'd still hit the top planes and just have the direct light coming from a different direction. Don't know if that makes sense or if that's clear or not, but hopefully as I do more, it'll make more sense. Like you'll see it as I do it. So that's facing the top. This is facing down, but this is kind of facing up. This fold, that's facing up. This front of the shoe is actually facing up. So I'm going to hit the entire front area of that shoe. And then this part of this horn thing on his shoe, I'm going to hit that. And maybe a little bit on that back shoe, but not too much. So I've just hit all the top surfaces now with this blue soft light. So it's already added a bit of rendering to things. So that's good. Now what I'm going to do is go back to this shadow layer. You can see if I turn on the light. I guess that's what it is, turning on the light. So I guess I'll label the layers background, original lights shadow, and this is this would be ambient light. Okay, so now I'm going to think about where the light's coming from and reveal the light there. So I'm going to hit, maybe I'm going to make it a little bit at an angle. Right now it's kind of coming straight from the top down, but I'm going to hit sort of, if you think of a box, like this, I'm going to mostly hit this with light, but I'm also going to have this getting a bit of light as well. And then the brightest part is probably going to be the corner of that, the edge where this turns, because that's usually what happens, is the edges and the corners of things get lit up. So yeah, that's kind of the reason behind that is because on, like, the light is the brightest. You'll get reflections when things are directly perpendicular to the light. It will create a reflection, and it's very rare to get a surface that's perfectly perpendicular to the light, so that the light like bounces and gets a mirror reflection to you. However, if you have an edge and you zoom into an edge, it's not like that. It's like, if you zoom in, you'll see it's made up. It's kind of like that. Like, there's no perfectly sharp edges. And so from here, there's a bunch of different planes, right? So the chance that one of these planes is perpendicular to the light, I mean, one of these is probably going to be perpendicular to the light, because there's so many planes from here to here that wherever you get that plane that is perpendicular, you'll get the mirror reflection, which will create a reflection of the light source, which will look like a highlight. So that's what a highlight is. It's a reflection of the light source. All right, so going to work. Just paint in sort of the top and a little bit on the side. And so I'm using a soft brush here, and I really want to make sure I don't hit into the shadows. I'm more focused on, you know, just getting the light. But you could use a hard brush as well. I'm opting for a soft brush for this one, just because I'm going for this kind of almost like an action figure. I kind of want to get this plasticky look going on. So for that reason, I'm using a soft brush. You could use a hard brush as well, though. So let's hit this area. And I'm kind of thinking about the form. So I think of this head kind of like a sphere first. So if the light was just affecting it uniformly, it might be something like that, where it's brightest in this area. But I don't want to go into these shadows. So, but I am thinking about it like a sphere. Again, I'm going to hit, you know, some of these planes that are facing towards us. And then let this area on the side be a bit more in shadow. And pretty quickly you can get things looking a lot more 3D. Wherever there's an edge, like here, this, I don't know, this area folds down, so you'd get an edge there, an edge there. You can get an edge here, and then the fingers. And yeah, it's a pretty easy and quick method. If you're lazy like I am, you appreciate the easy and quick methods. But it's also just time. It's just efficient for time to have these. I'm not saying like you should only do processes that are fast just because they're fast. Do what you enjoy, but I do feel like, I don't know, it's not bad to share methods that are fast and effective. So you can see, as I said, gets pretty three-dimensional pretty quickly. And I just have to really think about the forms of what I'm painting. Now, I have black on this airbrush, just a regular airbrush. And if I paint black, I reveal things. If I want to go back to shadow, I just go and use white. So I'm alternating between black and white as I need to add or subtract. And then I use X to flip between the two. So that's how I'm doing it. And this is getting more three-dimensional. This part of the shoe might get a bit of light. The side of the leg might get hit. Maybe a bit of this body. But yeah, so now we've got a bit more value. See if I do a before and after, you can see how it now looks three-dimensional. So now what I'm going to do is add occlusion. So occlusion is where things get very dark, so dark that you can't really see. I mean, it's so dark because the light has a hard time getting into it, sorry. So there's a few ways I like to do occlusion, and I'm going to, I either use levels like this, you just get a levels adjustment layer, and you bring the middle slider down towards the white area, and you'll see how everything gets dark. And then, so I either use this, or what happens is it does saturate the colors quite a lot. So if you're not going for that, sometimes it's better to use hue saturation, just darken it down like that. I usually increase the saturation a bit and then make it a little more red. So that feels like it might work better. So now I have this on its own layer, and what I'm going to do is fill it with black. And now that it's filled with black, wherever I paint, it will reveal that darker tone underneath. So now I paint with white, but I'm only going to hit the areas that are deep in shadow. So for instance here, light might have a hard time getting in. So I'm going to fill light in there. And yeah, I'm not sure this actually works for the jacket because I'm getting this kind of like a brownish tone, which on a jacket like this, it probably would be more saturated. So yeah, maybe I won't do it on the jacket with the occlusion, but maybe I will do it on the face and stuff like that. So under the neck, maybe on that nose a bit. But yeah, it is getting kind of dirty, so let me check and see what I can do. Can make it more saturated. That'll get rid of some of that dirtiness. Okay, so that should work better now. Yeah. So yeah, you don't want to overdo this. I think that's the biggest danger, is just overdoing it. And I just want to kind of look for planes and see what would be good to hit with things like this. So maybe just under areas, or where like two things touch, like this area in the armpit, that's probably going to be a spot light has trouble getting into. And again, if you mess up, you just hit X and then paint with the opposite. So in this case, black to take it away. And big brush strokes will get you more subtle and cool transitions. So I'm not going to really worry that things go outside for now. I can clean that up later very quickly. Just trying to get the big areas down, and then areas that really need to go dark, I'll zoom in and kind of do that carefully, because you kind of don't want too much occlusion. Usually occlusion is just at the darkest areas. Overdoing it actually makes things look less cool, less 3D. So kind of got to be careful and disciplined with how you use this technique. And as I said, I use a bunch of different techniques at different times, and I just kind of thought maybe it would be nice to share different techniques with you, just in case, you know, one of them is like, hey, I like that one, I want to paint like that. Then all right, well, now you kind of see how I do it. So I'm going to have this back leg go more into shadow. And then this area where the knee bends can get a bit darker. Now underneath here, I kind of want it to go quite dark. And I'm also thinking about this as how it's close to us, so it's going to get more contrast than things that are further away. They tend to be less contrasty. Underneath the shoe, I'm going to hit that. Again, don't worry if it goes off, because I'm just going to select the mask and then delete the areas that are outside of that. So yeah, kind of got most of that in. Probably around the horns, it's going to get pretty dark. All right. Maybe I'll kind of draw in some individual hair strands. We've got the big shape, so once you've got the big shape, you can kind of break it down fairly easily into individual strokes. I don't want too much on the glasses though, because those I kind of want to pop out. So I'm going to go in the shadows and actually make sure there are like less shadows on the glasses, so I get like a reflection on them. All right, now I'm going to select around the character, hit Shift Control I or Shift Command I, and go to this hue saturation, and then just fill that with black, and then it gets rid of everything on the outside. So now it's starting to look more three-dimensional compared to where we started. But the colors are getting a bit ugly, so that's something to, I guess, be aware of, that they might get ugly, and then you could stop here and call it like done. Maybe put a shadow on the ground. Guess we can do that. I'm just gonna take color, soft brush, get like a shadow underneath. Kind of thinking about the shape of the shoe. I'm kind of not worrying about the color of the shadow. I'm just painting in a shape for the shadow, and then I can worry about color and stuff after. So now that I have the shape in, I can lock the transparency of that and take some of this color and sort of just paint it into the shadow. So the shadow is kind of picking up reflected light. and then the areas around, I can sort of soften them and blend that in with the background like that. So yeah, you could stop here, or you could start to actually make it more like bring more of the light in. So last time I talked about the importance of rim light, how rim light can really bring make things look more 3D, because it enhances the what am I trying to say? It shows off the planes better. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that again. Made a new layer, and I've got layer linear dodge on, and I'm using like a gray. If it's too light or dark, I'll adjust it. But this should be okay for now. And I'm going to make sure I have the layer masked. So I just took the ambient light mask, hit Alt or Option if you're using a Mac, and then dragged that mask, and then it's here now. So whatever I paint stays within this. And then zoom out, and then I can go ahead and start to add this light. So this is what's really gonna pop things out. And I'm just painting directly over the lines. The lines disappear, and having those lines kind of disappear will help with the effect of kind of looking like 3D and not, or looking three-dimensional, not like 3D, but just looking three-dimensional. I'm gonna hit the back of the head. And I'm thinking like the light's coming from the side. So because everything was kind of darker in the beginning, this really shows up more. And I'm doing this kind of heavy-handed, just hitting all the areas. And it's probably not, it's probably not super realistic, but it is effective for quickly conveying information. So I'm thinking about, what planes to hit. This is like, we're about 30 minutes in now, so it's sort of a fast way of getting stuff in. Even if you were just going to paint it, sometimes this can help to just get a rough sense of the image down quickly, and then can worry about, fleshing things out. And it's a lot easier when you have some information already there. So I kind of have values that are already there. And then I can select from them. So for instance, with the hair, I can use this as a highlight color, because now I have it there. And again, it gives this sort of plasticky look, which, I'm not a huge fan of it personally, but I do see that it's fairly popular these days. And I don't know. I think in some cases it helps if you want a character to not look too realistic, because that could get kind of strange. I'm just using an eraser to smooth out that a bit. I felt like it was a bit too strong. And that's something you can always do. You can put in stuff and then sort of knock it back if it's too strong. And that is completely fine. Maybe the edge of these shades get hit with light. Let's go on this nose, pop it out. So light probably wouldn't hit here, right? The hair would block it. And if you were, you know, strictly doing what is realistic, you probably wouldn't put that here, this light, but I just want to convey the form. So I'm not necessarily interested in what looks realistic. I'm just trying to get what looks like, what shows off things. So in my view, cheats are okay so long as they help to tell the story better. And in these types of, like in the cel-shaded thing, it's kind of hard to get some of the details about the character. So, you know, I can't really say what the wrinkles look like, or, you know, tiny little details. What exactly do his knuckles look like, or something like that. But I can do that in this version. So as you add more rendering, kind of allows you to add more information, more detail, bring the characters a bit more to life. So I switch back to a soft brush. And I mean, mostly that's sort of okay for a block in. All right, so I mean, maybe I'll add a bit to this back. Maybe there's a bit of light coming from behind, sort of hitting into some of these shadows. But I'm doing it a bit lighter, so it will show up, but it's not as strong as the light coming this way. All right, so I think I'm going to throw on a color balance layer to just bring these colors together a bit more, because right now I'm getting kind of muddy colors. Before I do that, though, I do want to strengthen some of these shadows, especially in the shadows of the jacket. They should go a bit more colorful. So I'm going to make a new layer. I put the layer mask on it as well. I'm going to set it to overlay and get a pretty saturated color. And I really want to make these shadows more vibrant. So I'm adding some of this in there. This might be a bit too much. We'll see. I'll put it down and then I'll evaluate it. But I do want these shadows to not lose their saturation, especially in the shadows. For these glasses, I want those to be more strong. So I'm going to bump those up. Just using a saturated color will bring those colors out. And then maybe with the blue, especially on this symbol, you can even kind of go around that so it kind of glows a bit, maybe even with the glasses. I'll let some of that light blend into the area around it. And that can kind of help to bring things together. Like here I have a lot of blue, so if I brought some of that blue and reflected it into his face, maybe into the hair a bit, that can work for, you know, bringing things together and having these bouncing lights coming around. You know, here I want to bring a bit more vibrancy to these parts of the boot, so I'm going to add that in. Maybe the blue parts get a bit more blue as well. And then there's a lot of blue here, so that probably will bounce into this horn area as well. Okay, so maybe just this underneath. I'll add a bit of reflected light from these shades on the bottom of these horns. I think it kind of looks cool. Kind of brings things together more. And maybe with the hair as well. You know, just bump that up a bit so we're not losing too much saturation. All right, so now I'm going to throw on a color balance layer and just see, you know, this is going to affect both the background and the character, by the way. So I'm just going to see what, you know, what looks good. doing this back and forth. So as I go more towards the cyan, you can see how dead the shadows become. So I don't really want to go that way. Usually I warm up my shadows, kind of bring it a bit more purpley. And I desaturated the colors a bit in the beginning because this is already very balanced and it's too kind of a purpley blue tone. So if I didn't desaturate it and I balanced it, it would kind of be overkill. So here I'm just gonna look for what works. Do I want to go more yellow or more blue? I mean, both give different feelings. Maybe I'll keep it probably more in the middle. So 0. And that's the shadows. Now I do the same thing for the midtones. And again, I'm just checking, like, what do I think looks better. Maybe I want to pump the yellows up a bit more. And then for the highlights, so again, this is sort of a cheap way of doing things, but you can see it kind of brings everything together. So at this point, what I can do is make a new layer and then just kind of paint from here on out. So I've got a lot of information down here, a lot of color, a lot of value. And you can see if I turn the value on, it's quite a lot more 3D than when it started, right? But you can still see lines in places. Things aren't fleshed out, but I do have this stuff I need, or at least most of it is on the page. So now what I can do is just a slow process of, zoom in, get a brush. Here I'll use a paintbrush and just really, I guess, just paint. I do want the mask for now. I don't want to be painting into the background, so I'm gonna just copy the mask on him. So whatever I paint stays within this. But I can go ahead now and, see this area with the black line. I don't want that black line there. So now I can just go ahead and clean up. And this takes time, but, it's still faster having all these values down than if you didn't. It does speed up the process quite a lot, because I don't have to, kind of think about every color. What color is this? What color is that? The colors are kind of on the page, and they're there for me to just color pick from. So I'm using the eyedropper, and I use Alt or Option temporarily changes the brush to the eyedropper, so you can, select colors and get rid of a lot of this black. Another thing I could do actually is I can make a hue saturation layer, I think, and set it to lighten, and then just raise this, and it'll just get rid of all the darks a little bit if they're too much. But it does it globally. I don't want that. Okay, never mind. Don't want to do that. I'll do the same thing, but I'll take this. This is kind of the dark as it is. I'll just put a hue saturation layer and lighten that, and change the color a bit warmer. So it's kind of knocking back some of those lines, but I realized that maybe it's not good. Maybe it's not worth doing. Okay, that's the problem with doing these live, is stuff happens that's not, you didn't plan for, but that's okay. So yeah, I changed my mind about that. But anyway, you can just go ahead and continue with the detail work now. So, these glasses, maybe just get rid of the lines here. And it's not like you can't have any lines at all. But for the most part, it does make things look more flat if you have lines. But I mean, you do see certain things outlined in nature, so it's not like they can't exist. So now I'm doing the hair. And again, if I need to, I'm not going to do this too much right now. I'm just doing it to show you, but you know, I can add in like individual strands as needed. And I'm just selecting from what I already have. So all the colors should be harmonious and working well with each other. Everything should play nice because it's all balanced, and we already took care of that. And then in terms of like the areas of light and shadow, those are kind of handled as well. So, you know, he's got eyebrows like this, but they're probably not going to look like that. You know, probably they're going to be the same color as his hair. And eyebrows tend to be softer, so, you know, can add some softness to that. And, you know, I'm trying to not lose everything that I got in with some of these layers, like this reflected light on the skin where it gets really pink because it's close to the horns. And the glasses, I kind of want that. So I don't want to get rid of everything when I'm getting rid of the lines. And I'm trying to think about brush strokes when I'm doing this. I'm just trying to get better at doing that because I don't do that enough. But either I want the stroke to go, you know, around the form. Like if this finger is, you've got two axes. You've got one axis like this, and then one like this. And I want to either follow one or the other. So I don't want to be doing like this, for instance, brush strokes like that. I either want to go this way or this way around. And I'm just basically, you know, just painting at this point. So I'll do this a bit, and then I imagine at some point it's going to get fairly boring to just watch me doing, you know, just detail work. But I do want to kind of go through it at least a little bit just to give you the more accurate sense of what it's like, so you don't feel like I'm just, you know, doing a little bit and then turning off the camera and then just fixing everything and you don't know how I did it. Because I kind of hate when I watch videos and they're kind of skipping through parts because I feel like, wait, what did you do? I want to see. So for that reason, I'll do a little bit more in this. But I think, you know, at the end of the day, if you want it to look really realistic, I mean, if you're like me and you're not super skilled, because I'm sure there are people who can do it in a much cooler way. But I think for me anyway, a lot of it just comes down to time. Really just, you know, rendering each individual form, taking the time to make everything all nice. And you can see I'm just working on a hand right now, and there's so many areas that need to be worked on. So it's just, again, taking the time to do it all. Looking at areas like this, for instance, there's a lot of orange, so maybe some of that would bounce into the skin, so I can take some of that orange and put it into the skin where it would bounce like around the butt of this palm, right, like there. It could actually get quite yellow. Again, gonna get rid of some of the lines here. And you can see, because we did the initial part where I put in like that blue soft light from the top and there's shadows and stuff, you can see just how complex some of the skin tones are getting. Like there's a bit that's blue, there's a bit that's a bit like orange, some more pinkish areas. And I mean, you can do that too, where you go in into the knuckles and just warm them up a bit. Bring a bit of pink into that if you want. Depends on what skin tone you're working on, but all those little things, those are just time. So here, get rid of those lines. Bring more yellow into this. I'd rather have the edge be kind of yellow with this jacket than a blue, because different materials respond to light differently, and with a lot of yellows they tend to stay in the yellow family from what I've noticed, like gold and stuff. It doesn't get that different. Like the color doesn't change that much. There's a few colors in it, but everything's kind of geared towards the yellows and the greens and the browns. It doesn't get like bluish. And I'm being sure to kind of switch to the, like I make a few strokes, I hit Alt, I select the color again, I hit Alt, and then pick up that. So I'm always getting kind of fresh color, and I get to manipulate the colors. So here, for instance, I can go a bit warmer, and then that feels like that went in now. And yeah, I mean, after you do this tedious stuff, you know, it starts to eventually look okay, and then seems to be what a lot of people respond to, and especially in work I've done. That's why I don't feel like sometimes people will say, oh, you got worse as you, because I'm doing cel shading, they'll interpret it as I got worse, or like, why did you stop painting? Why did you get worse? But I don't think of it as worse. I just think of it as different. So for this, for instance, you can see it's just the same basic form stuff over and over again. It just, the more you do it, the more variety you have, the longer you spend on it, the more realistic it's going to look. And maybe that's impressive, but for me, it's not like it's unimpressive. It's not like I think, oh, it's completely pointless to add value and subtlety to things. It's just, I don't think it's more skill than just drawing. I think it's the same skill, just done more. You spend more time. And I'm a very lazy person. I like to get my ideas down, but then I kind of lose interest as soon as I've got the main idea in. I kind of feel like, all right, let's do something else. So when it's work, I kind of have to spend the time rendering, but when it's not for work, I'd probably rather just do a different piece. So yeah, so for the comic, it's not about, you know, being super rendered or anything like that, and so I don't need to work on that, but I do have to do a ton of boring stuff for the comic. Maybe I'll walk you through that sometime, just the process of making episodes and stuff. So yeah, you can see after all that time, it kind of got some more progress on the hand. I guess I'll work on the face a bit. And I kind of like, I'll take an area, for instance, this area, I got a bit of the shadow down here, and then I know this rim goes all the way around, so I take some of that light and I just paint over it. I'll mix this so it blends nicely, and then there we have like kind of the edge. So here's the skin of the arm, but there is a ton of orange here. So I'm going to put quite a bit of orange into his arm and kind of mix that in. So it's all kind of combining now. And can almost let it fade off. you know, that might be a bit too much. So I'll bring it back a little by putting a bit of occlusion here and here. So I didn't make the line, I just put it in these two corners, and then I'm going to fade it off, and it's going to imply the line that this went all the way around. Like that. All right. Take some of this. So it took about, what, 30 minutes to get the basic part down. I mean, that's provided you have a cel-shaded image to start with. But yeah, like about 30 minutes to get all the major stuff down. But then this stage will, you know, it's been about 20 minutes, but it can take many, many hours of doing this. So you've got to be patient if you really like this type of style and you're like, well, I want to paint like that and have all those details and stuff. Well, if you do tons of studies, I guess you get really good, then you don't need to worry so much. You can get much faster, but otherwise it's just a lot of time and effort that you have to put in. So this area close to the finger, I'm going to let that get fairly pink. And I mostly put the reflected light into the shadows. I don't put it as much into the, you know, midtones and stuff. I just let it really shine in the shadows. So like this area, I can let that get fairly pink because it's in shadow. But it's also pretty close to the hair, so maybe right on the edge it actually gets a bit more green right on that edge of the finger. Then this part's close to the horn, so that might get a bit pink. As part of the eyebrows kind of going around, I might pick up some of that light on the side. Again, it helps a lot to have the colors kind of done, so I can just sample from what's already there. I don't have to worry about inventing new colors. Just can take them from the image itself. I definitely want to get rid of the black on the face. Black just usually doesn't, like, it's not good to make your shadows go towards black, usually on skin. It's better to have it go like colorful. On dark skin, you still want it to go more colorful, I would say. Like, you don't want the gray black, you want a chromatic black. And what that means is just like, this is a gray black here, and this is a chromatic black. It's actually a dark color, but it will look like black. This is a darker chromatic black, whereas this is a black with no saturation. Hopefully you can see the difference between those two. Just rendering that nose a bit more. And maybe it would have been good to, you know, think of it more as one big shape and do it more like that. I suppose that would be faster, but that's a bit of a different technique, so maybe I'll do that technique another time, where you just break things down into very simple shapes and work with those. So under the nose, it's going to actually get a bit lighter as the light bounces back into the nose, and it's going to get a bit warmer. So I can warm that up a little bit. And go a bit lighter here. Make sure we've got a cast shadow. And then get a bit darker here as this part of the face kind of turns in. Don't want to go too dark, so I want to keep all these values fairly subtle. Let's see what we're working with. So yeah, they're still fairly subtle. And I'll just do a before and after, right? You can kind of see what's happening, and you know, as we do that to all the areas like the lips, getting rid of the black and just letting the value explain what's going on. See, this is very like bluish, so I don't mind the darkness, but I want it to be warm because that's where lips are filled with blood, so they're gonna be warm. Let me get a sort of a warm crease there. Get a bit of this lip catching some light, and maybe this catches some too. Depending on the skin tone, you could add more red to the lips. I think I should add a little bit. So I'm just going to pick the skin and get a little bit more pink in there, just for that lower lip. So again, trying to keep it subtle. Get his butt chin in there. And also try to think about the planes, like this part of the chin is still facing down. So it's important to get that. So it's because it's in the shadow. Here I can add a bit more reflected light, because reflected light really stands out in the shadows. And then here, this side of the face is pretty close to that collar. So I'm just gonna actually paint with that blue, and then sort of blend into it a little bit just to get that transition. Then as you zoom out, it's sort of indicated there. Okay, so I'll try to do a bit more on the face and then just go and hit certain other areas. As I said, it's going to take many hours if I wanted to take this to a full finish, but that wasn't really the intent. The intent was more to kind of show you a technique and how it's kind of done. But yeah, I mean, if you wanted, you could entirely skip this step and just stop like a few steps before, and then you still have something that looks a bit more three-dimensional. And I'm just constantly asking myself, like, does this look right or wrong? For instance, this part of the chin didn't look right. It occurs to me I haven't flipped almost at all, which is, you know, bad. Should flip more. Okay. So this character, Aradicus, is not meant to be super handsome, so I don't have to worry about, you know, if he looks kind of ugly, it's, well, you know, it's okay. It's not a bad thing based on his character. Usually when I'm just painting, I try to make things look cool or pretty or something, but not every character is that way, and wouldn't be right to make everyone sort of cool. I think when I'm working on a project like Kei, for example, in this case, it helps because you end up doing so many different things. Like if you have to draw a background NPC character, it's actually important that they don't stand out and you don't make them cool, because if they're too cool, they'll fight for attention with the characters that are supposed to be cool. So you can make them kind of cool, but you don't want them to, you know, be cooler than your cool characters or your main characters. Maybe even your main characters, it's not the most important thing that they look cool. It's that they, you know, feel like that character, that their personality comes through. And I mean, yeah, so before I was really much more caring about making something cool as opposed to making it according to the story, because I wasn't really working with the story most of the time. I was just working on single illustrations. And when it comes to like card art or just illustrations like that, you know, comic books and stuff, it is important to make the characters look cool. That's what they're going for. Let me just work on this thing a little bit, his evangelical symbol. So on this edge, because it's an edge, that's where I said like most of the chance of reflection is going to happen. So that's why I'm adding a reflection right on that edge. And I used a more light color, but also I shifted the hue. I made it a bit more green. So if I want to go to like a white highlight, I could, here's kind of like the blue, right? And I go to green, and I'm going to keep going and go lighter, then a lighter green, then go even lighter, and now I'm kind of into a yellow green, and then I can go even lighter and just be a very saturated yellow, but light. So not too saturated, but like saturated and light. Because anything that's light is kind of not saturated, or it's less saturated, because you lose saturation as you go brighter. Like the most saturated is this area, the middle, and then as you go towards white, you get less saturated. As you go towards black, you can still be saturated, but this way you get less saturated. So, I mean, an easy way of getting this effect is just using something like color dodge, because it does that. It brightens things and shifts the hue and saturates them. So there's that. If I don't use like if I just go for white, you can see what happens. Like see how you get this kind of chalkiness to it. But by going through green first, I eliminate that chalkiness. All right. And then I can imagine some light like passes through this and hits the back, and it kind of gets more saturated here. That'll make it feel a bit more glass-like. You can play around with different hues as well. And get some greens in there. Some more blues. And it kind of works. Maybe I would make this a bit darker on that corner. So there is a definite corner there. So now by making this dark and this lighter, that edge is much stronger. Right, and this is reflective as well, so go put in a little highlight there, and the horns look really strange with this dark, so that's pretty important to get rid of. So there we go, that's already looking a lot better, a lot more three-dimensional just by getting rid of that super dark area. And some of these colors are from the original shadows, which were a bit too red. So this now looks a lot more realistic. I'll add a little bit of reflection on the back there. So now we've got quite a lot of interesting hue and value variation in this horn thing. And because this is blue, I'm going to bring some blue into the bottom. It's reflecting from the shoe. Get a bit more saturated for this edge. Again, get rid of the lines there. I'm trying to remember to keep the blue and the orange a bit separate. So for the orange, maybe it goes a bit more yellow on the edge. Now for the pants, depending on the material, they might be reflective or they might be more matte. So that's, you know, something you have to kind of figure out. I'm not exactly sure what kind of pants he has. I think originally they were meant to be sort of leather pants. They kind of look more like jeans now, so not sure which road I want to go down, because to turn them leather, it's not a huge like, it's not that it's that hard, but it is very time consuming, or at least, you know, trying to not make a super long video. Just want to make one long enough that we get a good explanation of the technique. I'm going to take some of this ground and bounce it up into this shoe. So when you can have the environment influencing the object that you're painting and vice versa, that really adds a lot of reality and believability to the image that you're working on. So it's very important to think about those things. So I'm thinking there's going to be a brief kind of bevel before you get to the sole of the shoe, and that's pretty much going to be one value, so that's what I'm kind of doing here. And then because if there is a bevel, what that means is there's an edge here, so if there's an edge, there's a chance for a highlight to show up. I'll go and add one. There we go. I think I don't want his pants as reflective as I had them, so I'm kind of taking them down a notch, which is going to make them feel a bit more matte, but I'm okay with that. So if you have the drawing sort of decent, then painting, I always feel anyway personally that painting isn't that hard once you have the drawing. It's the drawing that's the big difficulty. And by the drawing I don't mean, you know, using a pencil or anything. I just mean getting the proportions, anatomy, perspective, all of that more correct. Just trying to make this a bit more complicated. Maybe he's got a bit of a pudgy belly. Doesn't strike me as the type of person who would be very disciplined about what he eats or anything like that, or not the type of person who would work out either. So I think it kind of makes sense for the character. Again, that's a corner, so that's why I'm adding a highlight on that edge as it turns. And adding speculars, like these little highlights that I'm doing, it can really change the material, like what the material is made out of, because different materials, like certain materials, don't get specular highlights, like cotton, things like that, where they're very matte surfaces. They're not going to get specular highlights. But if the surface has a bunch, then it's probably very shiny, something like chrome. So here I want to get it quite a bit darker in this area. So when it comes to painting, you're able to do a lot more with edges than you are with just like a comic style. I mean, unless you're doing like a painted style, but I mean just in drawings. When it comes to paintings, you can think more about lost edges and shadow shapes and things like that. Whereas when you're only doing cel shading, you're most likely just dealing with line. So this arm, I want it to be less like distracting because it's kind of going into the background. So I'm trying to not put too much into it. But I do want to get rid of these blacks and replace them with something a lot warmer, like that. I find when it comes to skin, a lot of variation tends to just be fine. Like, it's often good to have more variation. It's like you can add a bunch of colors, and if they're too strong, you just kind of paint over them, but let them show a little bit. For instance, if I added like a weird green here, maybe that's too strong. But if I knock it back by painting over with the skin tone and then kind of select it, now I've got this kind of greenish color, which isn't entirely bad. So yeah, if it's too striking, you can always knock it back. And then one of the things with skin is just like all the value changes are, not all of them, but a lot of them are super subtle. So like here, right, if I just indicate with kind of a close value, it'll start to feel like skin because it's like a soft transition, and skin's super, the value shifts are very subtle. where the fingers get close to each other, usually it gets very warm in that area, so that's why I'm saturating it here, because the light bounces and then it bounces around and it picks up that blood, and it or is influenced by the color of the blood, and so you get subsurface scattering, and the colors influence one another. They get more vibrant. So there's that. And you can see like all sorts of little areas that need fixing. For instance, right there with the finger. To fix that, I would have to, get out of the mask, make a layer on top, and then just, fix that manually. So I just want to get rid of some of these super obvious black lines, or blue, whatever it was, because they're making things look not three-dimensional. But as soon as I get rid of those lines, suddenly it's a lot more 3D. I'm gonna see how much reflected light from the green hair I can put into this shadow. So, like the hair color is this, well, in that specific spot, and the shadow that I ended up using is that. So, it's a mixture of the two colors. But it'll feel like it's being reflected from the hair onto the horn. And then this horn is probably actually going to cast a shadow onto this hair. It's probably going to block some light. So I can just do that. So don't be afraid to use cast shadows, and just big areas where you can knock it back, because images actually look better, I think, when you have big areas of shadow, like that. See how it kind of, I tried to line up the shadows kind of close, so it feels like the same shadow is affecting both these areas. But yeah, letting shadows, like this whole region in here, can actually kind of darken it and let it just go back. You don't need too much information there. Some of these tones can almost just blend together and disappear. Can just get dark, nondescript and dark back there, and doesn't look bad, at least to my eye. So guess we can do some stuff with the background, maybe not too much, but guess I'll add a bit of light. Maybe a bit of dark down here. And I want to reestablish some of these, the form. I think I lost a bit of form on the hair, so I'm just gonna bring it back a little bit. So I just used a multiply layer because I wanted to, get that turn a bit better. You can see the value, what it did. And let me put that mask on it. So yeah, right? That kind of helps. So in terms of values, you know, it's getting there slowly, but it's getting there. And then it's just a lot of the same. So I'll just use color dodge and hit our angelical symbol. Maybe hit the glasses a little bit and then tone that down because I went overboard, but yeah. So we got our picture of Aradicus, kind of ugly, but again, that's his character and the original, so you can see a before and after. I think I prefer it in black and white, but I tend to prefer everything in black and white. So it's got this kind of 3D feeling. One of the last things I could do actually is to take some of the background tones and kind of go over some of these areas. So I'm knocking them back into the background. So you can see the before and after. That kind of pushes things back, and that might be too much, so I can just lower the opacity, find a spot that looks right. Maybe that's okay. And you can always, you know, just keep working on it. Find areas that you have problems with, like this line caught my eye, and just get rid of it. And just, you know, keep doing it until it looks good. I think I don't have much time left, so I'm gonna call it done for now. But yeah, hopefully, you know, this helps. You can always let me know if you like seeing videos like this, or if you want to see something different. If you have any suggestions, they're always welcome. And mostly I just hope you get a sense of, like, there are many techniques that you can use, and if this one, because this one's fairly fast, like, it does take, as I said, it takes hours to do a good job, but it's only been, you know, an hour and 30 minutes or something. So I often spend, you know, between 15 and 30 hours on a piece. So it's not, you know, it's not super slow when I think about it that way. So yeah, if it helps, that's great. And I hope it does. And thanks for watching.